Jens Martin Skibsted, today's guest, is a brilliant designer and co-founder of Manyone, a firm working at the intersection of design and strategy to create a more sustainable future. He is helping to design the mobility of tomorrow. He'll share insights about his work and his superpower. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe. Welcome to the Superpowers for Good show. We empower you. Jens, thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation. I'm so excited to have you join me from across the pond to learn more about Manyone.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Wow, this is, I think you have at Manyone, you're using the intersection of strategy and design, which is an important dynamic, but what you're doing with it, a focus on making the world a more environmentally friendly place, coping with climate change, that just resonates as such an important thing. Tell us about the great work you're doing at Manyone.
So Manyone is, even on a global scale, a very big design company, and but of course, as you're pointing out, having some purpose with what you do might be one of the points that sets us apart. And personally, I've looked a lot at the mobility space, so basically trying to make cars, bikes, anything that commutes sustainable in some shape or some way, and then most are actually looking at digital products, right? So it's a strategy that's applied digitally, and because at this point everything seems to be digital, and and so one of the first projects we actually took on was now he's the king, but back then he was Prince Charles, and he had this sustainable markets initiative where it's basically a huge marketplace for any bigger green investment. And so that whole interconnecting that whole bit and making it digital was one of our first projects. And so really from the get-go, we got to show what it is to have a green vision, and how that can actually translate into design.
Yeah, that is fantastic. I would love for you, Jens, to share some of the examples of your work that are the most innovative and exciting in your work, especially with those transportation ideas. I mean, there's some fun things I see going on, and I imagine that you're right on the leading edge of this important work.
Yeah, so Manyone have a lot of different departments, and they're all over the world, and some that are perceived as the more cutting edge are mixed reality and virtual reality. We have like a very strong team that deals with that. Personally, I'm in the mobility space, and I would say one of the most exciting and biggest projects I've been on is designing an electric car. And the idea was, so how would you make this car if it was a bicycle? If you look at bikes, they're extremely efficient and effective in cities, and very, very green, right? So they're even actually it's better for the environment that you bike around than you walk around, right? You spend more energy walking than biking. So 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 having all of those advantages of a bike, how could you translate that into a car? And cars are fairly problematic because they take up a lot of space. So people are used to sitting in traffic jams, and of course there's a lot of fumes that people actually die of. And then you have the whole global warming. All of the CO2 that comes up. So it's a very problematic types of mobility object. So how can you take some of those advantages from a bike over to a car? And a very special object came out of it. Well, a car, but a pretty unique car. And when we dealt with a lot of very heavy hitting German engineers, and they were, every time we were one people, they would be 23 in the room, and so it was like more or less a trench war, because nothing was possible, and we were told right from the get go that none of these things were possible. And so the way it worked is we progressed. After each week, we got to push them just 1 centimeter. Oh, so this can be done. Yeah, okay. And and the end of the day, we changed everything. And so, for instance, we had a transparent front fascia, basically where in front of the hood you could actually see through. So it means if there's a duck crossing the street, you can see the duck and the brake, and
Right.
you had visibility just about all over the car, and that's one of the things you do have in on bikes, is you can see everything that's around you. And
Yeah.
also it was built in a way that if you did hit a pedestrian, then actually the safety was as focused on that pedestrian than on yourself. And
Right.
it was a very narrow thing, so you could whiz around without just getting too stuck. And there's a whole digital bit of it, so you could link it up with your enterprise and also with other means of transport.
Yeah. Now, in Europe, in many countries, and Copenhagen and Denmark, of course, being an example, there are some teeny tiny cars allowed in the bike lane. Was this car that small that it could was eligible to use the bike lane?
No, it was not small enough for that. They have these different categories, and I think actually they are called the same in the US. We're just Some are just not used in the US, but you have, I think,
Yeah.
L50, which is the kind of car I think you mentioned there, and then L80, which is how we started designing it. But then we actually said, okay, you need to go on the highway, because people are just going to opt out if you can't go on the highway. But of course, it was designed for the city, and but yeah, if you need to go to a separate city, you don't want to leave your car, right?
Right, right. That is so true. People really are not willing to invest in an automobile they can't take that far. So, uh, tell us a little bit about the features of the car. Get us just a little bit of a sense of how fast it can go, how far it can go on a charge, some of the things that we love about electric cars.
Yeah, so the normal stats were kind of like so it can go, what would that be in miles, but maybe 150 miles, the distance, so not
Hmm.
very long, but compared to that it's so compact, then it was very long. And the top speed was also less than 100 miles an hour, so not very impressive. But then you're not gonna you're not gonna come near that in a city, right? And you just
Right.
need to
Yeah.
go fast enough where we go on the highway. But some of the things that were um, very special were some of so for instance the how much room you had on it. So this is a very small car, roughly. It's the size of the smallest cars you will see driving around in American cities, right? It's like when you
So, like
notice a
the
car,
smart
this
car
one is
that,
very small. That's how small it is.
yeah, yeah.
But when you sit in
Now,
such a car, you're cramped. But in this car, since we were able to remove the whole of the engine in the front, you could, you could, in theory, put luggage in front of your feet, or you could, there's just no human that's too big for that car, right? You can have as long legs as you want, and they can still be on that front, uh, on the front seat next to the driver. So you had this, kind of almost Doctor Who impression that you go into this little thing, and then it's just gigantic.
wow.
So that was one of the features, and it was ultra light. Um, and you had doors opening in a different way. So today doors either open, as we know them. So if you are on the outside, they open out against you, And then you have this what they call suicide doors, where they open kind of against the wind, and
Right. Yeah.
but this one had kind of like reverse suicide doors in the sense that the front door was a suicide door. Suicide door is not a really good name. People don't die of it anymore.
Yeah. Right.
You know? and and then the back one was like a normal door. So what happens is when you go out, if both the driver and the guy in the back seat goes out at the same time, they go in each their direction. And this is what happens if you have the opposite. Then you will actually walk into each other. And such a small thing, for some reason, it hadn't been explored, right? So there are a lot of these quirky little things. Also, we went back in history. So, for instance, the back view mirror was more on your front panel rather than up in
Sure.
the roof, or what do you call it? Not the roof, on top of you.
The ceiling, the
The
windshield. Yeah.
ceiling, exactly. So now today is all the back rear view mirror is going to be in the ceiling. We took that down, and in terms of there are advantages in terms of that we really worked on having to move your eyes as little as possible. So all of the front panel was actually kind of projected in front of you, so you almost didn't have to move hands or eyes to constantly be in control. And then a
Yeah.
little bit like you could say an Apple iPhone or something like that, you only have the essentials, right? So there's no all of these details that you don't really want to know, and it just makes you prone to accidents.
Yeah. This is fascinating. So this is you've worked on the design. How your client, I imagine, is the one responsible for producing it. How's your client doing in getting that car on the road?
Yeah, so right now that client is a bit in a pickle because this is a very sad story, but basically he died. He committed suicide. So it's a very
Oh,
sad story. I mean, the car is almost fully developed, but now his daughter sits without a dad mainly, and with ownership of this IP.
oh, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah,
Heartbreaking.
yeah, it's a very very sad story. Yeah,
I'm
I'm sorry,
sorry.
it wasn't intended to.
Yeah, that's our conversation took a sad turn there, but that's hardly as significant as the experience that you and they had who knew him. I'm so sorry. Um, Jens, you're doing amazing work. You've built an incredible company. I wonder if you would uh, tell us, what do you see as your superpower?
That's a good question, but I think it would have to be imagination. That
Yeah, yeah, that's a powerful superpower. I mean, so many of us are lacking in that area, and we can't imagine the things that aren't right. We really, I mean, how few of us, so few of us, could even conceive what an iPhone would be until someone put it in our hand, right? And they went, "Oh, that's a cool idea." So, yeah, that imagination is a powerful thing. Um, can you give us an example of when you used your imagination to successfully complete something you're proud of?
so I think still today I use my imagination constantly. I mean, just here before our conversation, looking at was looking at flying cars, right? So when people speak about flying cars, that's what they think about, because then they don't need to imagine anything. It's already been imagined for them. But flying cars only really have one important insight for cities, is that they can go in three dimensions, right? So far we have thought of cities as something that happens in front of your on the ground floor in front of your door, right? But it is actually all around you. So that bit is wonderful, but then you got to come up with, if now everything is three-dimensional and vertical as vertical as horizontal, then what are the objects then, right? So this is one of the things that I'm preoccupied with for the time being. Why get stuck in the Jetsons type thinking, right? What are all the other possibilities when you have a vertical city and a vertical transport? But this is of course just speculation. But this is what I'm thinking about now. I mean, I think the thing that I'm proudest of was the first company I started, a bicycle company called Biomega, and there what I wanted to do is to think of bikes differently. And back then, good bikes were sports bikes, and city bikes were bad bikes. so that you put a lot of energy into making fantastic sports bikes, whether they were mountain bikes or racing bikes, and they could
Yeah.
cost fortune. But then, if
Yeah.
it was for the city, it was just like something random, not made
Yeah.
for anything really. And so I just took all of the technologies out there and thought, how can you kind of think such a thing over? And you know, I had lots of ideas. Making them, for instance, night glow, which it's good for traffic, and it's it costs a little more, but it's not really a big investment. And so anyway, there are just tons of invention. I used shaft drives. Which
Oh,
so instead of a chain, so
yeah.
which made sense in terms of if you want to go to the office in your suit, the last thing you want is your one side of your pants being ripped off and full of
Right.
oil.
Yeah.
So you avoid that
Or
with.
all wrinkly from being strapped down.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, so that I had to say that was that.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Does the company still operate? The bike company you created?
Yes, it does.
Wow. Fantastic. That's great. Well, I mean, much of what you do at Manyone is to direct, coordinate, train people on the intersection of design and strategy. But when you talk about design, I think there's got to be an element of imagination. And so you must, from time to time, have to coach people on how to dig deep to explore and use an imagination. When you do that, how do you coach people to do that, to use their their imagination, to channel their inner yens?
Yeah. So I don't know. Well, actually, importantly, I will ask them never to be like me, because I will ask them to be like themselves. Right. I think that this
Yeah.
is where you start,
Okay.
and and I think that's a thing that anyone has developed a method for. Right. So one of the things um, when you get together, instead of saying this is what I want, this is like all of the traditional analytical management tools, rather you try and figure out what is your vision for the future, and also uh, where do your values lie. I mean, the moment the two of us have the same direction and at least understand each other's values or specific business values, then we can move super fast, because you can come up with something and you will know immediately if I'm aligned or not, right? If it fits, it has the same purpose and intent. There's a process in the beginning. It's called worldview process that Manyone uses, and so it's very different from other design company and others strategic consultants. Because we don't follow this kind of normal process where, okay, so you're a client and this is the market, this is so yeah. And ironically, the reason, apart from wanting to create a better world, and end of the day, any company that does not create a better world does not create value and will be out of job at some point. um, so you've got to I mean, so the irony is that now more than ever we have huge problems that cannot be solved instantly, right? So we got to look way further into the future than we used to do. For global warming, for instance, nobody's going to fix it tomorrow, but still we're very much in a hurry. And then you have a market that demands things here and now. They want, I've had a client that asked me to design headphones in 2 weeks. Right? I mean, in 2 weeks we've written a couple of mails, right, to one another. So how do you make something ultra fast that will last for 50 years in terms of not necessarily last physically, but in terms of fit with the vision? And
Yeah.
and so it turns out that you really need to then project that future and agree on what future is desirable, rather than try and figure out how might it be, what like. So the process really is a little bit inversed, and it's also paradoxical that you would then all of a sudden start talking about what are your inner values, what are your inner beliefs, what are your what is your ethical standpoint when you're in a hurry, right? It seems like oh, hey, no, we don't have time for this, but this is actually when you got to, if you want to go fast, you really got to dig deep, because once you're in there, then you can go ultra fast.
I see. So as we think about imagination as a skill, as a superpower, uh, it's informed by this strategy and design. Is that and values? Is that what you're telling us? I'm wanting to make sure I understand.
Yeah, so the imagination comes in because the the future will not create us, and we are uh, I mean, we choose to make machines. We're not in some, a lot of times when you talk about the future, then there's people look at some specific technologies, often developed in the Bay Area, and then this is what's going to happen. We're going to whiz around with these drones. We're going to have driverless cars. We're going to have all of these things, and then and this almost a given, right? And this is where I think. We can't just follow whatever we're dictated. We got to make sure, is this what we want? Right? Is this a desirable future? And once you ask that question, you cannot solve it without imagining it. Right. So in that sense, imagination is a very important power. Otherwise, you end up being, the future seems predetermined, and you end up somewhere that was not really desirable, right? So you've seen a lot of, I mean, people speak a lot about these technologies with, what happens with, who owns your personal, your intellectual property, with Meta and with Alpha, or what they're all called, right? I mean, we've seen, or with Uber, you also had a lot of pre-existing cab drivers, bus drivers out there. So had you thought about them? So a lot of these ideas didn't come out of what was the future we desired, but more like, what tech do we have? How do we make money out of it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, Jens, I am so grateful that you would take the time that you have with me today. I'm grateful for your insights. You're such a creative mind. I'm grateful for the opportunity to just get a few minutes with you to learn from you, and I'm intrigued. I look forward to reviewing everything you've taught me here about imagination. I view that as something that is almost a defining weakness for myself, and so I'm eager. I'm eager to dig in and learn more about how to develop that imagination. So thank you very much.
Well, the honor is
Before we
mine.
wrap before we wrap up, I wonder if you would just take a minute and tell people how they can learn more about Manyone and how they can connect with you personally.
Yes. So I think two things they can do. One is, the simple one, to go on Manyone's website, manyone.com. But also they could read the book I've written with a co-author, Christian Basin, which is called Expand, Stretching the Future by Design. It's an American book. You can buy in an American bookstore. So those are two of the things. And then they can also follow your development and see how your podcast becomes all imaginative.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, Jens, thank you so much for taking your time today. I wish you every success in your efforts to help build cities that are more climate and environmentally friendly. I appreciate that work, and I want to see you succeed.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for
All
having me.
righty.
It was a pleasure.
Oh, all righty. Well, thank you, and let's do some good.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Superpowers for Good show. Twice each week, we host changemakers who share their impact, insights, and superpowers. Don't miss another episode. Subscribe today at superpowersforgood.com. That's superpowers good.com. Be super empowered. Get your copy of the book, Superpowers for Good, as an ebook, audiobook, paperback, or hardcover edition via your favorite online retailer. Interested in having me speak to your company, organization, or association? Visit devonthorpe.com. Then let's talk. Now, keep using your superpowers for good. Together, we can reverse climate change, improve global health, and eradicate poverty.